And welcome back now to Face the Nation for some analysis on all this news, and there is a lot of news. David Ignatius, columnist for the Washington Post, David Sanger, the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, our CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford, and our own John Dickerson. I don't know where to start, so I'm just going to pull something out of the air here and say we'll start with NSA surveillance. David, I guess nobody's surprised to find out that great powers spy on one another, but is anyone surprised that the president and the White House deny that he was aware of this? Can that be?
Well, we'll find out. I think there'll be careful examination of this. He gets his president's daily briefing every morning, and they go through precisely the information NSA collects. That's the prize trophy in the briefing every morning. I think it's likely that the president wouldn't drill down on the precise individuals, except in the cases where they involve U.S. warfighters overseas. I'm sure he knows it's Karzai saying to his chief of staff something. Whether he knew it was Angela Merkel talking on her cell phone, I don't know. What we've seen is that the NSA is just one of those organizations that if it can do it, it will do it. You know, these are young technophiles. They're like hackers. They solve these puzzles just for the challenge, and they got out of control. I liken them to the Sorcerer's Apprentice. If you remember the character in Fantasia, who suddenly all the buckets of water are flowing. It just got out of control.
Well, it does kind of make you wonder, doesn't it, David? I mean, maybe just because we're reporters, but I'm sitting here reading this or getting this intelligence brief. Wouldn't you say, how do you know that?
Yeah, you know, in the first year of a presidency, I could imagine a president not knowing it. By year 5, you have to say that at some point he's likely to have asked that question. If he didn't, it's almost certain that many of his national security aides would have, because while the president gets, as David indicated, this presidential daily brief, it's an analytical product. What his aides get are the analytical product and the annex beneath it of the raw intelligence. So that then raises the question of oversight, which is Angela Merkel was not a high priority target. Nobody was worried about terrorism from Germany other than al-Qaeda cells that are located there, or nuclear proliferation or so forth emanating from there. So she is part of what David describes, I think quite rightly, as a system that was mostly on autopilot. And they have collected this kind of thing from allies back to the days of the Cold War.
But isn't this, I mean, the level of hypocrisy here on the part of our allies? I mean, I'm just aghast to find this out. Everybody has known about this. This is just sort of the way it was. I mean, those of us in Washington know these kinds of things are going on.
Congressman Mike Rogers said it in a humorous way. Espionage is a French word. I mean, you know, everybody does do this, and this has just been part of the conduct of foreign policy since U.S. Revolutionary War times, since the beginning of history. You've had spies. What's different now is the technology, the capability to listen into everything. And I think that that's what the administration is reckoning with, is that the technology is so different, we're going to have to think about new rules of the road.
And John?
Well, I was just going to say, in this question of running amok and being on autopilot, David, you used that word autopilot. That's what Secretary of State Kerry talked about, something being on autopilot. If you add this technological capability, if it's running on autopilot and the people who are overseeing don't even know what it's doing, then it has this control and the overseers don't know what it's doing. And one of the amazing things is what the NSA was doing with Google and Yahoo, scraping all of their data out of the air. And that ability really does make it seem like the NSA has found new powers for itself, that the people who were supposed to oversee, who were supposed to keep this delicate balance between safety and civil liberties, they just don't know what's going on.
You know, go ahead.
I was just going to say the mystery here is between what John rightly says they can do and what they actually are doing. So in the case of Google and Yahoo, or even in the case of Angela Merkel, we know that they can get at the cloud. We know that they can get at her cell phone. The mystery that we don't know as a reporting target for us these days is how much are they actually pulling down? And on that, they've been extremely quiet.
Let me, you know, as I'm listening to you, it brings me to Jan, and I'm thinking, I guess it's a little unfortunate they didn't let the NSA put together the website for Obamacare. Because if we talk about on this side of the table how wonderful and these great capabilities, I mean, I have never seen anything that flopped the way this thing.
You know, and the thing is, when you hear all these technological advances that are leading to this surveillance, people just assume in their daily lives technology at some point is going to work. So I think that was, you know, going into the website, something nobody, Americans would not have expected. People in the White House and that were not testing this were getting some clues leading up to the launch. But now you've got even David Axelrod saying this website is a debacle. And I think the problem now for the White House is that, you know, you can fix a broken website, but this is more than a broken website, because for a lot of Americans, this isn't just an introduction to a website, it's their introduction to the Affordable Care Act. If you go back and look, Gallup did a really interesting poll at the beginning of this month. 71% of uninsured Americans didn't know, weren't familiar with the Affordable Care Act. And now, what are they seeing? What have they seen this month? Broken website. Cancellation letters going out to millions of Americans saying they're going to lose their existing coverage, something no one expected because the president repeatedly said, if you like your plan, you can keep it. Notices that their new premiums might be higher in some cases. So all of this kind of go into play, and they can't get on the website to find out more information. So it's kind of this perfect storm of a lack of information they're getting that they didn't expect, and a president who made promises that it appears, at least a lot of people in the White House knew he wouldn't be able to keep.
Well, and you base that on what, well, there's a story this morning in the Washington Post that details before the president made those statements that if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, that they were debating in the White House whether he should say something like that.
The Journal had a great piece yesterday talking about that as well. I mean, the kind of internal debate suggesting this was a little more than the president, as the New York Times put it this morning, misspeaking here, because there was apparently, now it's being reported, this extensive debate on whether he should say that, and policy advisors knew that wasn't going to happen, that these plans will have to change to meet the new minimum requirements of Obamacare, including ones before March of 2010, which is where they're trying to draw this line now. Those plans also have to change.
So John, what happens here? Are they going to have to postpone this thing? Because basically what you got here now, you've got a deadline where if people don't get their health insurance by a certain time, they're going to be fined, but you have a website that they can't get on to get their health care.
And so the problem is there could have been there could be some delays and different ways to delay it, but the problem with delay is that while it might help out those people who are desperate to get onto the Obamacare program, the insurance companies don't want that because they want mechanisms to force people to sign up because of these risk pools. They need lots of healthy people getting in these risk pools to keep the prices down of premiums. So you want some things to force people in. If you elongate the period that they can come in, or you take away the fine for not signing up, it reduces the pressure, and that creates a policy problem. What you have now is you have some political problems and some bad PR problems, but this would create potentially a policy problem. The problem, though, is that a lot of Democrats who've defended the Affordable Care Act, those who were up for re-election in 2014, now see a real problem. It's more than just a website, as Jan's detailed. It's now a problem both with the overall health care, but then it's also a government problem. There's a story in the Washington Post today that's really amazing about a memo that was written by David Cutler to the White House, a White House healthcare advisor, in 2010, saying you're not ready to roll this thing out. So then you get into a very big problem that Democrats are going to have to defend, which is, can a government handle a question like this? And Republicans have all along argued, no, it can't. So that gets to be a very big problem that can really spin out of control into next year's election.
But you know, I think this goes beyond politics and the fallout for Republicans and Democrats. This is about health care, and a law has been passed that people are going to have it, and now it's difficult to figure out how they're going to get it. What happens here, Dave?
Well, I think the reality is that we're going to stumble through a period of trial and error. And the only thing I'd say is that there's no technology success in the world, especially in America, that doesn't have a kind of rough break-in period. I mean, you know, we have a zero defect culture for Washington. Anything in Washington has to be perfect the first time out because it's so political. But you know, in the real world, companies have beta products that crash all the time and don't work. You know, when Microsoft began, every one of us had error messages that drove us crazy, and it gets better. And that's what'll happen here. And I think people should just think, well, this is it's more like maybe what they experience dealing with technology companies than it is like what they get from government, which is usually kind of basically.
But you know, David, it occurs to me as you look, if you step back from this and look at how other countries are looking at the United States right now, it's just one more case of how we can't seem to get out of our own way. Yeah. And I mean, we have the government in constant gridlock. We're not making decisions the way that great powers traditionally do. And now this is just one more thing, but people just say, what's going on over there? What are you guys doing to yourself?
That's right. The government gridlock raises a question of whether or not we can make the policy decisions we need to be a global leader. The healthcare computer system issues raise the question of whether we can execute. And execution has been, as one senior member of the Obama administration said to me this week, as they were dealing with all of this, their real Achilles heel throughout. And just for exactly the reason that David laid out, that we've all seen computer systems that roll out badly, that we're always getting Microsoft updates to our operating systems and so forth. That would have argued in favor of the Obama administration making sure that this system was being test run for 6 months or a year before it came out, which is what most technology companies will tell you a large, complex piece of software requires. And instead, they gave this weeks. And that's actually, I think, where the investigative focus should be. Why that they tried to go do this so fast and so on the fly.
Well, and not only, I mean, they gave, in some cases, days. There are companies that are going to be working and needing these systems to tap into some online insurance, private insurance companies. They tell us they got the information from the White House 2 days before the site went live, so they weren't able to get in and do the testing that they would have required. I mean, yes, I mean, this website is going to get fixed, and they're saying by the end of November it will be fixed. They brought in Jeff Zients, management consultant. They brought in a tech surge, people from Google now working on it. But October 1 was the launch date for the president's signature achievement, and with great fanfare, they pointed to that date. They had healthcare clinics across the country signing people up for appointments that day to get people in for this promise of affordable healthcare. And on day 1, 6 people were able to sign up. I mean, that suggests, when you're talking about a confidence of the American people in execution and what government can do, that does not inspire a lot of confidence.
Well, what happens now, Jan?
Right now, I think what John pointed out is you're going to see more calls for delay, and that raises its own problems, because you're going to have the sick people who've been so anxious for this insurance because they've been denied coverage because they have these pre-existing conditions. They're the ones who are going to get it. But what has to happen is that the young healthies, as they call them in the insurance industry, they're the ones who have to sign up to make this whole thing work. And if they don't sign up, and they have no incentive in year 1 to sign up because there's not a penalty, the hammer has been taken off the table, then you get in this concern about the death spiral.
Do you think they will they delay the day when people have to sign up?
As John says, it's a political problem now for Democrats in 2014, but I think that the concerns, the real concerns the White House can point to, the valid concerns the insurance industry can point to, if they do have a delay, causing the program, the entire program, to almost potentially collapse if you get this death spiral with only sick people signing up, is going to really push against any delay. I think Democrats are going to start noticing that. John, I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
And back to the Davids, what happens now on this NSA as these revelations continue to come out?
There are 2 reviews that are underway. One is internal to the White House. The White House has said very little about it. Then there's an external one of 5 former members of the intel community, some legal scholars, who are supposed to report by the middle of December, and say that report will be quite public. But I think what you're discovering right now is that the White House is standing firm on the domestic collection of this bulk data about all the phone calls we all make. I think in the foreign arena, the Angela Merkel kind of interceptions, you're going to see far more oversight. And I think that's sort of what you were hearing when you heard Senator Feinstein today issue those complaints. I don't know how widespread her view is, but my guess is it's going to be increasingly difficult to justify doing this kind of surveillance on allies who you need as partners in not only intelligence collection, but making sure that our cyber systems are safe.
A friend of mine said to me, David, we'll fix the intelligence, the damage that's been done to our intelligence gathering. But he said what is going to be harder to fix is how damaged our influence has been.
I think this has really hurt U.S. national security. President Obama came in hoping to repair relations with allies. This has shattered whatever progress is made. One thing that I've heard people in the White House talking about in the last few days fascinates me. People in the intelligence world always say, look, the 4th Amendment doesn't apply to foreigners. You know, we may have privacy issues at home, but overseas, it's a different thing. They are beginning to ask whether there should be procedures for foreign nationals that minimize their personal data when the metadata about who they called is collected, so that there's not the same kind, there's something closer to the way we treat our own citizens. That would be a huge change, and they're beginning to talk about it.
All right. Well, something we're going to be talking about for a while, both of these subjects, I think. We'll be back in a minute to talk about one of the most fascinating aspects and stories to come out of the assassination of John Kennedy in just a minute.